We get you the week's biggest stories from around this world. What is the India story? It's the story of the world's biggest democracy.
We are developing the road infrastructure. In the end of 24, it will be equivalent to the road infrastructure of USA.
We have now entered the growth phase. And I believe that the growth rate in India is going to be exponential.
Two narratives of Indian story which need to be brought center stage.
Every week, the India story will bring the most incisive analysis, the most authoritative voices.
India will be a significant pole in the universe of AI going forward.
India is walking tall, India's stature is different, India's voice is being heard.
And the biggest newsmakers.
This is just a start. Tokyo, we won one bronze. Paris, we won a rocket.
Good to see that, women cricket is getting more excited and everybody is looking up to that.
And these stories need to be told, and they are guided by the compass of their conscience.
From India for the world, the India story, the show for the global citizen.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Beyond World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the global curve. I'm Shivan Chandra.
And I'm Heem Kaur Soroya. Israel's cabinet has approved a breakthrough deal for the release of 50 hostages. This after optimistic evaluations of talks on the same, where US President Joe Biden affirmed that a deal to secure the release of hostages and a pause in the fighting could be announced soon. Now, how and when this breakthrough materializes remains to be seen. We will, of course, be tracking all the developments on that front.
While this is a huge development, it does not imply an end to the war. This is what the Israeli Prime Minister had clarified in his address, that Israel is still at war and they will continue to fight until they reach all their goals. This, while the BRICS group of nations have condemned the ongoing war, asking for an immediate truce. This and more right here on World DNA. Let's get you started with the headlines.
Israel's cabinet votes to approve a deal for the return of 50 hostages in exchange for a multi-day ceasefire. The deal is expected to see the release of mostly women and children in groups of 12 to 13 people a day.
United States has announced a strike on Iranian proxy forces in Iraq since targeting Tehran-linked sites in Syria on 3 occasions in the recent weeks, in response to a spike in attacks on American personnel.
Leaders of major emerging economies call for an end to Israel's war on Gaza and cessation of hostilities on both sides to ease the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip.
Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps unveil a new ballistic missile, Fateh 2, equipped with hypersonic glide vehicle warhead.
North Korea claims to have successfully placed a spy satellite into orbit, demonstrating Pyongyang's determination to build space-based surveillance systems.
Canada's Davis Cup defense ends at the quarter-final stage as Finland come from behind to win 2-1 and progress to the last 4.
Now, of course, we're starting with the major breakthrough that appears to have come in this conflict that's entered its 7th week now. It is achieved in this ongoing Israel-Hamas war. That is a deal on hostage release.
It's a huge breakthrough, one which everyone has been waiting to hear of since the war started. Now, in the latest, Israel has approved an agreement to secure the release of hostages being held by Hamas. All details of the agreement have not been made public yet, but as per an Israeli government official briefing, deal is expected to see the release of 50 living Israeli citizens, mostly women and children, in groups of 12 to 13 people per day for 4 days in total.
Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the deal, it's the right decision as he summoned his war cabinet. However, he did add that the war will continue.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל, כאילו אחרי ההפוגה להשבת חטופינו, אנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה. אז אני מבקש להבהיר, אנחנו במלחמה, ונמשיך במלחמה. נמשיך במלחמה עד שנשיג את כל היעדים שלנו.
Hamas senior officials had said the talks are at a decisive moment. US President Joe Biden also said they are very close to the deal. However, nothing is done until done.
While the deal is secured, relatives of Hamas-held hostages demonstrate outside Israeli Defense Ministry. Families, they're longing for the return of their loved ones. They protested in high anticipation of the deal, while some of them kept their hopes low and wished not to rely much on it.
Despite the negotiations, there has been little respite in fighting on ground though. Israeli army continues to release footage of operations in Gaza.
The Israeli military said that it had pushed further into a tunnel underneath the Al-Shifa hospital complex. It released an image of what it says is a blast door that was breached. The army also released a picture of the tunnel passage beyond the breached doorway. Elsewhere, the IDF has completed its encirclement of Jabalia, which is north of Gaza City. The army describes this as a significant combat area.
On the other hand, the military wing of Hamas released a video that shows militants planting explosives to target Israeli soldiers.
Now on Tuesday, BRICS nations convened an extraordinary summit to discuss the crisis in Gaza. The meet was virtually hosted by South Africa. The nations called for an immediate and sustained humanitarian truce in Gaza.
South Africa's parliament also voted in favor of a motion calling for the closure of Israel's embassy in Pretoria, as well as the suspension of diplomatic ties with the country. Now, it is up to President Cyril Ramaphosa's government to implement the decision. While chairing the BRICS meet, Ramaphosa accused Israel of war crimes and genocide.
The collective punishment of Palestinian civilians through the unlawful use of force by Israel is a war crime. The deliberate denial of medicine, fuel, food, and water to the residents of Gaza is tantamount to genocide.
Now, Israel's government has voted to back a deal for Palestinian Hamas militants to free 50 women and children held as hostages in Gaza.
And according to the Israeli Prime Minister's office, hostages will be released over 4 days, during which there will be a lull in the fighting. And the announcements are the most optimistic yet of a potential breakthrough in this conflict, which has raged on for almost 7 weeks. It's left thousands dead on both sides.
Now, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu told a meeting of his cabinet that accepting a deal for the release of hostages was a difficult decision, but it's the right decision. He stated that Israel will continue its war against Hamas even if a temporary ceasefire is reached with the militant group. Netanyahu also thanked the US President Joe Biden for his part in the deal to include more hostages and fewer crises.
במזרח ירושלים וביהודה ושומרון יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל, כאילו אחרי ההפוגה להשבת חטופינו אנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה. אז אני מבקש להבהיר, אנחנו במלחמה ונמשיך במלחמה. נמשיך במלחמה עד שנשיג את כל היעדים שלנו. לחסל את החמאס, להשיב את כל חטופינו ונעדרנו, ולהבטיח שבעזה לא יהיה שום גורם שמאיים על ישראל.
Now, sources from Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which took part in the 7th October attacks, disclosed details to news agency AFP on the condition of anonymity. They said that the tentative agreement would include complete ceasefire on the ground and an end to Israeli operations over Gaza, except in the north, where they would only halt for 6 hours a day. Under the deal, which the sources said could yet change, between 50 and 100 Israeli and dual national civilians will be released in exchange for some 300 Palestinian women and children currently held in Israeli jails. The proposed deal would also allow for up to 300 trucks of food and medical aid to enter Gaza.
ولكن أنا بعتقد أننا في لحظات حاسمة في هذا الأمر، وإحنا كلنا أمل إن شاء الله تعالى إنه تكون هذه الهدنة. إحنا هذه الهدنة المؤقتة التي بموجبها هو وقف العدوان أيام ودخول الإغاثة لشعبنا وتكثيف هذه الإغاثة، وأيضا بموجبها هي تبادل يعني المدنيين، نساء وأطفال مقابل نساء وأطفال من سجون الاحتلال. الخوض في التفاصيل هذا باعتقادي مش مفيد. المهم عندما ينتهي، لأنه نخشى الاحتلال يراوغ له شهر، وكلما اقتربنا من الاتفاق يعود إلى الوراء.
Hopes of a release deal have been mounting since Qatar stated only minor practical issues remain. Ahead of the meetings, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh had said, and I'm quoting here, "We are close to reaching a deal on a truce."
As stated in Arabic, we cannot comment on the details of the ongoing negotiations. We are working towards an agreement taking place, and we are now at the closest point we ever have been in reaching an agreement. We are very optimistic, we are very hopeful, but we are also very keen for this mediation to succeed in reaching a humanitarian truce.
The BRICS group of nations, including Russia, India and China, called for an immediate, durable and sustained humanitarian truce leading to a cessation of hostilities in Gaza. Here's what the US State Department spokesperson had to say.
We are very close to an agreement, but we are not there yet. As you have heard us say a number of times over the course of the past few weeks, nothing is final until everything is final. And at this point, everything is not yet final, but we are close.
Now, the hostage families have demanded that Israel should insist on the return of all those being held. The religious Zionist Party, a part of the coalition government, has voiced opposition to the deal, denouncing it as bad for Israel's security, for the hostages and for the soldiers.
Some security experts have warned that a talked about 5-day pause in fighting could enable Hamas to regroup, and that Hamas's demand for the Israel Defense Forces not to use observation drones during that time could put Israeli soldiers at risk. The Israeli government is facing a dilemma, with their two top priorities being to secure the release of the hostages while dismantling Hamas. And the government's job will be to balance these two stated goals. This is Jodie Cohen for WION World is One.
We're now joined by Bishop Garrison, a fellow at the National Security Institution at George Mason Law School and adjunct professor at Georgetown University. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Mr. Garrison, Israel's cabinet, as I mentioned earlier, it's approved the hostage deal for the release of 50 hostages for multi-day ceasefire. This, of course, I don't need to say it, it is a major breakthrough. Talk to us about how you see this altering the course of this ongoing war.
Absolutely. Well, anytime you have hostages released in this type of situation, it's a good thing. Again, as we've stated, as others have already discussed on this point, though, Israel is still finding itself very much in a hot war with Hamas right now, with the terrorist organization. So this is a positive step forward. I applaud the Biden administration for being able to help support these efforts, with Secretary Blinken and the president directly having a hand in this. But it is not over yet. It's not done until it's done, until not only we're able to get these hostages out of harm's way, but to get all the hostages out of harm's way. It was roughly a little over 240 that were taken on October 7th initially, to include Americans and Israelis within those numbers. So this is a very positive step forward, and we'll see some humanitarian aid, somewhere in upwards of 300 trucks per day moving in food and aid and fuel and supplies into the area, as you said, has been under a great deal of stress since this war began. But again, it is a step forward, not the final step.
It's definitely a step forward, Mr. Garrison. As you said, I want to take it a little further from there. Now, do you feel that the hostage deal and the frequent pauses, if there are more, and here's hoping that there will be more, will they help curb down the overall scale of the war, even though it will continue?
Of course, also important to mention now that the Hamas has welcomed this approval of the hostage release deal. That is the latest that is coming in. So that's another facet of this major breakthrough, that Hamas is now welcoming this deal to release hostages.
Well, yeah, well, it's a very, very valid question. Again, the primary point that we need to make here is to get the hostages out of harm's way. That will entail some amount of a negotiation, and that's what we're seeing exactly here. We're seeing aid come in because you still have other innocent civilians within the area, the vast majority of which, for both the hostages and other innocents caught in this, are all women and children. So we need to do everything we can in order to see these individuals taken out of the situation first and foremost. To the point about the use of drones and the concerns that any pauses may allow Hamas to regroup and to be able to shift their operations once again. That is an inherent risk with a situation like this. But in order to get those individuals safe, you have to take on some amount of risk in that regard. So we don't know until we see more of this play out. But again, strategists and tacticians on the ground are thinking through these things. It's a very dynamic situation.
Right, Mr. Garrison, of course, as we speak, there are a lot of developments that are coming in. One, that Hamas has now welcomed this move. Also, from what we do know so far, as per reports are coming in, the first hostage release would be on Thursday. That is, of course, a major development that has come in this regard. Netanyahu, however, earlier had clarified that this does not mean they're stopping the war. They will continue to fight until they achieve their goals. One, I think it's also important to understand and get some clarity on what their broader objectives here are. And would Israel be willing to have longer or more frequent pauses in this war going forward?
Well, that's a very valid question that I believe the United States, both in public and behind closed doors, are continuing to ask of the Israeli government, how many pauses are they willing to take on? How long are those pauses going to be? And what are the intended end state here? And what happens after this war is complete and those objectives or those goals are met? There's still a lot of questions that need to be asked here. But again, we have to continue to see this develop with some level of humanitarian support and aid taking place, because you have so many innocents that are now involved with this, and so many of them are women and children. So as Israel is continuing to think through its next steps, it has to take those ideas into account.
All right. Thank you for joining in, Mr. Bishop Garrison. Pleasure to have you here on World DNA with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, amid mounting hopes of a possible hostage swap between Israel and Hamas, with reports of the first hostages being released as early as Thursday, families of over 200 kidnapped Israelis, they are continuing their relentless pursuit of getting their loved ones back home, one day after clashing with the far-right Israeli politicians on the same.
You can only imagine the kind of relief that they would be feeling. It can start as early as Thursday, that's one day from now. Now, the politicians, of course, who want to bring in the death penalty as a possible sentence for captured Palestinian militants, that definitely remains one point of contention. But relatives of hostages held by Hamas in Gaza and their supporters mounted a protest outside Tel Aviv's Ministry of Defense. Their demand is the immediate release of all the hostages, holding signs with photos and the word kidnapped and murdered in English. Demonstrators voiced their frustration after being kept in the dark over a potential deal to free some of the hostages.
I think the only thing that I could call justice is bringing everyone back home, but I do understand that it's difficult, and I hope this deal will help us bring everybody back home as well. And I'm really hopeful that they'll come back soon.
Families of the hostages and their supporters also lay a table with empty chairs representing the hostages held in Gaza since the 7th of October. The posters and billboards bearing pictures of hostages held in Gaza since the 7th of October attack have also sprung up across Tel Aviv. Over in Rome, a group of relatives of hostages held by Hamas militants met Italian Foreign Minister on Tuesday evening. This after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked his government to back a deal to clear the way for the release of some of the hostages, which has now been welcomed by Hamas.
We are ready for doing, our best for helping you. Not easy, but we are here. Our doors are open for you, for your.
Meanwhile, families of those hostages who could not physically take to the streets remain glued to their TV sets in anticipation. One of them is 63-year-old grandfather Gilad Kongold, who has been forced to consume sleeping pills to cope with the loss. Kongold has 7 relatives missing, including his son, daughter-in-law, 8 and 3-year-old grandchildren and an 11-month-old baby. They're believed to be taken into Gaza by Hamas.
Nobody can imagine how we feel, okay? Imagine that your kid instead sleep in the bed with blanket, and it's underground, deep. It's deep tunnels. 3 years old, my granddaughter, she's loved to jump all the time, trampoline and the couch, and she's very happy. There is a baby, 11 months, that need to start to work.
On the other hand, families in the West Bank voiced their joy and optimism at a potential prisoner swap deal that could see their teenage son return home. Yusuf and Frida Abu Maria say they are hopeful of seeing their teenage son return home after he was arrested in August and jailed last month. Ubay is serving a 6-month sentence.
يعني أنا مبسوطة كثير. أنا بتمنى كل المساجين يطلعوا، سواء اللي أقل من 19 ولا الأكبر من 19. أنا بتمنى كمان اللي إلهم يعني سنين بالسجن، الأحكام العالية، النساء، الأطفال، إن شاء الله الكل بيطلع.
Now, despite a breakthrough in hostage release negotiations, there are still fears that the ongoing Israel-Hamas war might become a larger maritime war in the region. Shivan gets us all the details. Over to you, Shivan.
Thanks, Him. Of course, there's one good news, but then there are still a lot of fears about the war spreading into the larger West Asian region, which it already is, but now there is a new front coming up. The Israel-Hamas war has caused violence across different regions in West Asia, but now there are fears of it escalating into a maritime war. This comes as Yemen's rebel group, the Houthis, have claimed to seize a cargo ship in the southern Red Sea, further escalating tensions in the region. Today, we will decode if the heightened regional tensions are playing out on a new maritime front. First, let me show you a video. The video you see on the wall here, Yemen's Houthi rebels have released a footage of the hijacked ship. Take a look at this. It starts right here with the camera fitted right behind the helicopter. They come down. These are armed men. They are, of course, they are very well armed with bulletproof vests. They are trained and they are entering and infiltrating into the ship. The helicopter takes off and they continue further. Now, this is footage which has been released from the Yemeni Houthi rebel group. The Houthis hijacked this cargo ship. The name of the ship is Galaxy Leader, and it was in the Red Sea. Now, the ship was traveling from Turkey to India, and now it has taken to Yemen, taking 25 of its crew members on board as hostage. So, you see, the Red Sea shipping route is one of the busiest in the world. There are thousands of ships transiting through this stretch of water daily. Now, I'd also like to give you a glimpse of a map which will give you an idea of the kind of maritime traffic that we're talking about here. The Red Sea is a vital economic artery and is likely to become more so in the coming decades as a result of the large oil reserves throughout the region and precious metal resources here as well. Now, this is the strip of land, and essentially this is where there is a lot of maritime traffic. Now, this makes the route critical for the global energy security. More than 10% of global trade passes through the Red Sea each year. Most ships sailing from Europe to Asia take this route as it is a cost-effective route as well, and you can make out why. It crosses 2 of the 10 most strategic waterways in the world: the Bab al-Mandab at the sea's southern entrance and Egypt's Suez Canal right up top in the north. But there are security issues in the region as well. The drivers of insecurity in this area of the world center on proxy activities and regional rivalries. Historically speaking, piracy off the coast of Somalia was formerly the #1 security issue in the area of the Red Sea. But it has been reduced significantly now to a non-factor by a massive international naval operation that began in 2008. Now, since then, the war in Yemen has taken the place of piracy as the leading source of instability in the region. So what began as a political uprising and civil war in Yemen soon became another theater in the Saudi-Iranian contest for regional supremacy when Iran supported Yemen's Houthi rebels. Now, viewers, when Yemen's Houthi rebels released the footage that we showed you earlier of the hijacked ship in one of the busiest maritime trade routes, this is where it took place, questions started to arise. How did the rebel group know which ship to target? There are so many ships going over there. How did the Houthis manage to find a ship with an Israeli connection amongst the hundreds and thousands of other ships? Did any country provide the fighters with the intelligence that they needed to make it such a pinpointed strike? And they were armed with all their gear, and of course they had everything filmed as well. They knew what they're going to do with the footage. They were going to send out a message to the rest of the world. Was it Iran who gave the Yemeni Houthis the required intelligence? Iran is accused of backing the Houthis, though Tehran has denied helping the Houthis in this hijacking operation. But according to reports, the fighters used a helicopter, war commando style bulletproof vests, as we showed you, and they brandished assault rifles. Private intelligence firms are calling the hijacking an Iranian style vessel capture, and some are even pointing at how the attack is reminiscent of the vessel seizures that Iran's Revolutionary Guard have carried out in the past. Moreover, viewers, what's interesting here is that the hijacked ship passed by one of Iran's cargo vessels just before this attack took place. Now, this Iranian vessel is called Behshad. The Behshad is in the Red Sea since 2021 and it is sanctioned by America. US suspects that this cargo ship that I told you about, the Iranian cargo ship, moonlights as a forward spying base. Now, the hijacking of the Galaxy Leader points at a very disturbing sign. It is a sign of how the war in West Asia could play out on a new maritime front. Reuters is reporting that at least 2 commercial vessels linked to the same company have already changed their course in the Red Sea, and it is already creating fear that such incidents of hijacking might become the new normal in this war in West Asia. So, of course, there is a lot that has been happening in this war, with the maritime front becoming the next front where this war can spill over. But there is a glimmer of hope as well, with the hostage deal nearly through from both sides. Of course, stay tuned, keep watching World DNA. It's time now for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of World DNA, we will go back to Gaza and bring you the latest updates from the ground as well. North Korea announces the successful launch of its first spy satellite on Tuesday. The nation further vows to launch more such satellites in the near future.
Authorities uncover. Also on the other side, Ukrainian authorities uncover what appears to be the country's first instance of a cryptocurrency-based bribe. We'll tell you all about this right after the short break. Do stay tuned.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months.
The siren has gone off. I don't know if you can hear in the background what's going on. I'm going into the shelter now. So it's a very, very serious situation here across Israel. It's a state of emergency.
The United States stands with Israel.
Well, we are starting this broadcast with a developing story from West Asia, where Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas has launched a war against the state of Israel.
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
A new drug is making a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's. This medicine helps slow down a patient's cognitive decline.
We look beyond the text. We give you context.
Is China preparing for a war in the Himalayas? And tonight, we come to you with some proof.
Hypocrisy is stunning.
Do leaders mean what they say? Do they ever say what they mean? To find out how real news affects you, your decisions.
Just when Iran took one step in the right direction, it's
Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, we'll continue to bring you all the developments that have come in this morning with regards to the hostage release deal. Let's start by looking at the headlines first.
Israel's cabinet votes to approve a deal for the return of 50 hostages in exchange for multi-day ceasefire. The deal expected to see release of mostly women and children in groups of 12 to 13 people per day.
Hamas welcomes humanitarian truce approved by Israel that provides for freeing of hostages held by a militant group in Gaza in exchange for release of Palestinian prisoners.
United States has announced a strike on Iranian proxy forces in Iraq since targeting Tehran-linked sites in Syria on 3 occasions in recent weeks in response to a spike in attacks on American personnel.
Leaders of major emerging economies call for end to Israel's war on Gaza and cessation of hostilities on both sides to ease the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip.
Iran's Islamic Revolution Guard Corps unveiled new ballistic missile Fateh 2 equipped with hypersonic glide vehicle warhead.
North Korea claims to have successfully placed a spy satellite into orbit, demonstrating Pyongyang's determination to build space-based surveillance systems.
Son Heung-min scores twice and sets up another as South Korea beat China 3-0 to maintain their perfect start to 2026 World Cup qualifying.
Now we start, of course, with the biggest story of the day. Israel's government has voted to back a deal for Palestinians, Hamas militants, to free 50 women and children held hostage in Gaza.
Well, according to the Israeli Prime Minister's office, hostages will be released over 4 days, during which there will be a lull in the fighting. Hamas welcomed Israel's move and dubbed it as a humanitarian truce. Reports suggest that the first hostages may be released as early as Thursday.
Now, this announcement, it's the most optimistic yet of a potential breakthrough in this conflict, which has raged on for 7 weeks now. It's left thousands dead on both sides.
Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu told a meeting of his cabinet that accepting a deal for the release of hostages was a difficult decision, but it's the right one. He stated that Israel will continue its war against Hamas, nevertheless, even if a temporary ceasefire is reached with the militant group.
Netanyahu also thanked the United States President Joe Biden for his part in the deal to include more hostages and fewer prices.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל, כאילו אחרי ההפוגה להשבת חטופינו, אנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה. אז אני מבקש להבהיר, אנחנו במלחמה, ונמשיך במלחמה. נמשיך במלחמה עד שנשיג את כל היעדים שלנו. לחסל את החמאס, להשיב את כל חטופינו ונעדרנו, ולהבטיח שבעזה לא יהיה שום גורם שמאיים על ישראל.
Sources from Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which took part in the October 7th attacks on Israel, disclosed details to news agency AFP on condition of anonymity. They said that the tentative agreement would include a complete ceasefire on the ground and an end to Israeli air operations over Gaza, except in the north, where they would only halt for 6 hours daily. Under the deal, which the sources said could yet change, between 50 and 100 Israeli and dual national civilians would be released in exchange for some 300 Palestinian women and children currently held up in Israeli jails. The proposed deal would also allow for up to 300 trucks of food and medical aid to enter Gaza.
ولكن أنا بعتقد أننا في لحظات حاسمة في هذا الأمر، وإحنا كلنا أمل إن شاء الله تعالى إنه تكون هذه الهدنة. إحنا هذه الهدنة المؤقتة التي بموجبها هو وقف العدوان أيام ودخول الإغاثة لشعبنا وتكثيف هذه الإغاثة، وأيضا بموجبها هي تبادل يعني المدنيين، نساء وأطفال مقابل نساء وأطفال من سجون الاحتلال. الخوض في التفاصيل هذا باعتقادي مش مفيد. المهم عندما ينتهي، لأنه نخشى الاحتلال يراوغ له شهر، وكلما اقتربنا من الاتفاق يعود إلى الوراء.
The hostages' families have demanded that Israel should insist on the return of all those who are being held hostage. The religious Zionist party that's a part of the coalition government has voiced opposition to the deal, denouncing it as bad for Israel's security, for the hostages and the soldiers.
All right, now looking at other global developments. North Korea has announced the successful launch of its first spy satellite in orbit on Tuesday.
It vowed to launch more in the near future, flying in the face of condemnation by the United States and its allies. North Korea state media had released pictures of the supreme leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, watching the North's first spy satellite launch.
The launch prompted Japan to issue a missile warning for the island of Okinawa, urging residents to take shelter inside buildings for underground or go underground.
Now, the launch was first reported by officials in South Korea and Japan. They could not immediately verify whether a satellite has been placed in the orbit. Pentagon spokesperson Sabrina Singh said that the U.S. military continued to analyze the success of the launch.
A notice of the launch in the direction of the Yellow Sea and East China Sea was given to Japan's Coast Guard. The notice prompted immediate condemnation by Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Kishida said his country's defense system stood ready for any unexpected situation.
情報収集、そして国民への情報提供に万全を期すこと、そして関係国と協力をしながら打ち上げの中止を求めること。
Now, the White House also strongly condemned North Korea over its space launch, calling it a brazen violation of UN sanctions that could destabilize the region.
Moreover, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres denounced the satellite launch as being against Security Council resolutions on the subject.
And the complex puzzle is what I said.
Now, this is North Korea's third launch attempt this year. Pyongyang considers its space and military rocket programs a sovereign right and has said it plans a fleet of satellites to monitor moves by the United States and South Korean troops. Analysts say the spy satellites are crucial to improving the effectiveness of North Korea's weapons.
Meanwhile, South Korea separately plans to launch its first reconnaissance satellite from California on November 30th with US assistance.
Now, the dengue epidemic in Nepal, it's surging. More than 50,000 people have been infected so far this year, and at least 20 people have died from the infection that has reached all 77 districts.
Public health experts suspect that the health authorities are understating the number of dengue-related deaths. They say there are reports of more casualties in several districts than what has been officially confirmed. So the actual number of infected persons could be several times higher, and the government's case reporting system is unable to cope with the rapid rise in the number of those infected. And more than 80% of cases are asymptomatic.
Now, many people infected with dengue show mild symptoms and can be treated at home. Officials at the Health Ministry had hoped that the spread of the virus would stop once the temperature dipped with the onset of winter. However, new dengue cases are still being reported every day from various districts.
Dengue is a viral disease transmitted by mosquitoes. Last year, 88 deaths were reported and more than 54,000 were infected by the virus. Experts say that the dengue virus has of late emerged as a major public health problem in Nepal. A United Nations report states that at least 6 major vector-borne diseases have recently emerged in Nepal and are now considered endemic, with climate change implicated as the primary driver here.
Let's shift our focus to news now from the world of technology. Ukrainian authorities have uncovered what appears to be the country's first instance of cryptocurrency-based bribe.
Investigators suspect a lawmaker of trying to bribe the head of a government reconstruction agency. Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, commonly known as NABU, said that the lawmaker is believed to have offered the equivalent of $50,000 in bitcoins in exchange for state funds to rebuild infrastructure under his control. Now, according to the reports,
According to the reports, the lawmaker is a member of the parliament's anti-corruption committee. The Ukrainian bureau has not disclosed the name of the official. Reports say that the NABU have served an official notice of suspicion to the accused. The head of Ukraine's State Agency for Restoration and Infrastructure Development reported the bribe to authorities after receiving $10,000, which was supposed to be the first portion of the total $50,000 bribe. Since the incident, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine has released an official statement stating, and I'm quoting here, "This is the first illegal benefit in cryptocurrency in the history of Ukraine's anti-corruption institutions that has been documented." Over the last few months, Ukraine has stepped up efforts to stamp out corruption as it pursues membership in the European Union. Note that the European Union has made the fight against graft a key condition for negotiations to begin.
All right, imagine having a digital twin that makes it possible for you to receive the right medical treatment.
The question is, how would that be? The digital twin can be experimented on by researchers to find the best possible treatment. And what's even better is, you don't need to go near a pill or surgeon's knife to know what's wrong. Cancer patients going through rigorous and painful treatments are offered a ray of hope in the form of the Digital Twins Medical Project.
The project requires researchers to collect large amounts of data from women who are suffering from cancer. This data is then used to create complex computer models to make the patient's digital twin. In other words, clinical digital twins are virtual representations of the patients. Throughout the patient's treatment course, the digital twin is used for various applications, such as for predicting patient treatment outcomes. Diseases like cancer can vary a lot, so patients need treatments that are personalized.
With a real patient, you cannot make tests. You just put a treatment and then you expect the outcome, right? So if this patient digital twin model is accurate enough, you can simulate millions of disease trajectories resulting from modifying one patient factor or another, right? So that you are able to get, at the end of the day, a number of treatment decisions individualized for that patient that would improve patient outcome.
Now, the study seeks to simulate each patient on a computer by collecting genetic, physiological and behavioral data without putting the patient at risk. Various treatments can be tested on the digital twin, but how do the researchers get the data to make the twin? Well, researchers rely on AI tools for such clinical predictions.
So we are tracking them with a wearable device. We have some physiological data, then we have some data that comes from using the phone, and also some questionnaires that they can answer to reflect on their emotions and general feeling. So we have a more descriptive information about how the patient is feeling than what we get usually from clinicians.
The technology used for the research also takes into account the psychological and psychiatric issues that oncologists may not always have time to deal with. The researchers hope to publish results in a few years from now.
Moving on now to news from the world of business. Oxfam's recent climate report reveals a startling fact. The planet's richest 1%, constituting a mere 77 million individuals, catch the carbon footprint of the 66 poorest. That's a staggering 5 billion people.
Well, those are bad equivalents which are being driven here. Let's delve into the details of this eye-opening report. Take a look.
In a stark revelation, a recent report from Oxfam underscores the disproportionate impact of the world's wealthiest on global carbon emissions. Critical to this alarming revelation is the definition of the top 1%, characterized by an annual income threshold of $140,000 annually and an average income of $310,000. The disparity in personal consumption is exacerbated by factors such as location, renewable energy use, and transportation modes. Particularly, the extravagant practices of the super-rich, including private jets and yachts, significantly elevate their carbon footprint. Equally concerning is the revelation that 70% of emissions by the top 1% stem from investments in companies making substantial contributions to polluting industries, especially petroleum and coal. Oxfam's findings underscore that billionaire investments in these environmentally harmful sectors are twice as much as those of the average investor. As the world grapples with the urgent need for climate action, this report places a glaring spotlight on the responsibility of the super wealthy. The environmental impact of their consumption and investments raises crucial questions about their role in exacerbating the climate crisis, demanding a thorough examination of the practices of billionaires globally. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now, the great cleanup of the crypto sector continues in the US after FTX Sam Bankman-Fried. It is Binance chief Changpeng Zhao's time to face the law.
Zhao on Tuesday stepped down as CEO of Binance and pleaded guilty to breaking US anti-money laundering laws as part of a $4.3 billion settlement. And this resolves a years-long probe into the world's largest crypto exchange.
US prosecutors described the deal, which will see Zhao personally pay $50 million, as one of the largest corporate penalties in US history. Binance broke US anti-money laundering and sanctions laws and failed to report more than 100,000 suspicious transactions with terrorist organizations. Now, that's not all. The crypto exchange never reported transactions with websites selling child sexual abuse materials, as well as the proceeds from ransomware attacks. Reports suggest that the Justice Department is seeking an 18-month prison sentence for Zhao, the maximum suggested under federal guidelines. Binance will pay $1.81 billion within 15 months and a further $2.51 billion forfeiture as part of the deal.
Now, Zhao announced his decision to quit as CEO on social media platform X. He also took the responsibility for quote-unquote mistakes that he made at Binance. While US authorities have probed Zhao and Binance for years, Zhao's exit is dramatic development for the crypto industry. The deal also raises questions over the future of the crypto exchange, which Zhao founded in 2017 and is tightly controlled ever since. Moving on now. Sri Lanka, it's been cleared to compete in the international cricket by the ICC. However, the 2024 Men's Under-19 World Cup has been shifted to South Africa.
Well, the decision has been taken as a consequence of the suspension of the Sri Lankan Cricket Board. Well, Sri Lanka's membership of the ICC was suspended on 10th November due to extensive government interference in the board's administration. The SLC and the country's sports minister, Roshan Ranasinghe, have been in conflict over the past year. Ranasinghe accuses the cricket board of corruption, while the SLC says that Ranasinghe interferes in the cricketing activities. In a major relief for Sri Lankan cricket fans, though, the development will have no immediate effect on the daily running of the sport in the country. No bilateral or domestic series will be disrupted by the suspension. The ICC Chief's Executive Committee said in a statement that funding to Sri Lanka will also continue but will be restricted during the suspension. However, the 2024 Under-19 World Cup, which was slated to take place in Sri Lanka in January 2024, has now been shifted to South Africa.
Let's also now take a look at what else is making news in the world of sport. Clearly, we both are very excited for all the developments.
Let's get started. Alright, Son Heung-min scored a brace as South Korea defeated China 3-0 to maintain their perfect start to 2026 World Cup qualifying. Now, the Tottenham captain put the Koreans in the front after he steered an 11-minute penalty to right of the Chinese goalkeeper. He then netted again in the 45th minute. Son was also involved in South Korea's third goal, assisting Jung Seong-hyun's bullet header in the 87th minute. Jurgen Klinsmann's South Korea had thrashed Singapore 5-0 on Thursday. South Korea are top of the Group C with 6 points.
India were defeated 0-3 against Qatar in the FIFA World Cup 2026 second round qualifier match in Bhubaneswar. Mustafa Mashal, Almoze and Ali and Yusuf Abdurisag were the only goal scorers for Qatar. The win cements Qatar's position at the top of Group A with 6 points from 2 matches, and India remains second with 3 points. The loss ended India's 15-match unbeaten run at home. The Indian men's football team will resume qualifiers with home and away fixtures against Afghanistan in March.
Canada's Davis Cup defence ended at the quarter-final stage as Finland came from behind to win 2-1 and progress to the last four in Malaga, Spain. Milos Raonic, making his first Davis Cup appearance in 5 years, had put the Canadians ahead with a 6-3, 7-5 victory over Patrick Koko-Walter. But Otto Virtanen levelled for Finland by beating Gabriel Diallo 6-4, 7-5. He and Harry Heliovara then defeated Alexei and Vasek Pospisil in the deciding doubles. Now the Finns won 7-5, 6-3 to book a semi-final spot for the first time in the nation's history.
Moving on now, Frozen fans from across the world were delighted to enter the first Frozen-themed land attraction that's officially opened its gates to the public at the Hong Kong Disney Resort. And with that, we call a wrap on this edition of World DNA.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep watching Beyond World is One. News and updates continue on the other side. Come right back.
Israel woke up to a barrage of thousands of rockets fired from the Gaza Strip.